Good evening, friends. This is Sushroota here from AHAVA Readers and Writers Club. Tonight we have two dynamic women with me, ladies with me, Jashodhara Chakraborti and Mohua Chinappa. So Mohua has written her new book named Nautanki Sala and Other Stories. Without delaying, I would love to introduce Jashodhara Chakraborti first and then Mohua. Jashodhara Chakraborti is an author and a translator. She's a statistics graduate and an MBA. She has also been an executive and a mathematics teacher in London. She is the author of two books of the Wordskeeper trilogy, The Wordskeeper and Sky Serpents. The first one a bestseller on debut. In 2019, she created a concept for a young adult web series with Disney Hotstar. She is also a TEDx speaker. She has translated Hemendra Kumar Roy's Adventure for Young Adults, The Treasure, and is serializing a translation of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's opera, The Illusion Game, on digital platform Scroll Stack. Thank you, Yashodhara, for being a part of AHAVA Readers and Writers Club. We are very happy to have you here along with us.
Always a pleasure, Sushruta. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And now I would love to introduce Mohua Chinappa, the author. She's an author, podcaster, voiceover artist, and branding specialist. She has over 15 plus years in leadership positions as a public relations or corporate communications specialist. In her earlier stint at the national head of GCI, the public relations division of the Grey Worldwide Advertising Group, she has been responsible for bringing in business and creating campaigns for the largest brands in India and the international market. With her rich experience in other communications firms like Brandcom, HCL, ITC, and Genesis PR, she has led teams towards successful brand campaigns. Moa has a 360-degree experience in the entire spectrum of managing a brand. In 2018, she embarked on a new journey as a writer. She began a blog out of a cafe called Moody Moo. She writes from her heart as her blogs and articles extensively focus on brands that endorse gender equality, nostalgia, arts, and crafts of India. She now hosts an extremely successful podcast called The Mohua Show, which is available on multiple platforms. In this space, she interviews artists, entrepreneurs, and individuals who are striving to create economic and social change. Imandari se. Moa is currently on an entrepreneurial journey as a believer. Her endeavor is to give opportunities to individuals to share their stories to inspire change and create a platform for the unheard voices that need recognitions and validations. Thank you, Moa, for being a part of our Readers and Writers Club, and we all are eagerly waiting to watch this session live. And over to you, Josh. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mohua. Such a pleasure, if I may say so, to have you with me this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot see you, but you are most welcome to our chat. Um, Mohua, this has been a fascinating introduction. And if I may say so, you are the first podcaster I am actually interviewing. I've been extremely curious myself. So to see somebody make a success out of these different facets of their creative life is very encouraging for me personally. But we are here today, of course, to talk about your book, which I'm, holding with me and which I read in one breathless take yesterday. Um, and I think it's a very different book from other collections of short stories that I've read. And I would like to slowly, with your permission, give a few of the secrets away without necessarily hampering the launch of the book, which is on the 17th. So, with your permission, I shall start.
Yes, absolutely. The pleasure's all mine.
For all of you who are here, there are 15 stories in Nautanki Sala and other stories. And they're not necessarily very large stories, but they are stories that pack a punch. And the first thing I wanted to ask you, Mohua, is what made you choose the format of a short story and the particular format where you've got a story and at the end of it a data point that you like to highlight. which initially threw me a little. I thought, what's this doing here? But by the time I reached the second and the third short story, I was looking forward to the data point at the end of it. So, what made you think of your short story collection in this particular format?
So first and foremost, thank you so much, Yash, for having me today. And I am so humbled for somebody with your stature, to actually talk to me somewhere. I just feel that. For many years I was at home. I was also afflicted with a very crazy autoimmune disorder that left me bedridden. And one by one, my body parts had stopped moving. And then by the time my son flew the nest, I honestly didn't know what to do with myself. And I kind of couldn't put together a value to who I was any longer. And yet I had forgotten the person that I was and the people that I'd met. And of course, I tried to get a job. This is just a backstory about how these stories started. I tried to get a job as a journalist because I did not see myself going back into PR. The world of PR had completely changed. Everybody was talking technology. I was completely a dinosaur, by the time my son in 2017 when he left for London. And of course, I was, invariably what happens when in your 40s, when people are telling you a little about technology, the first thing you say, no, it's not for me, it's not for me. And because you're
Exactly.
frightened, and I was very frightened, like anyone else. So what I did was I applied for a job with a publication, and he was very kind, the editor, to say that you can send out a story, an article, and the creative group will, the people who write the features, they look into it, and if it works, then you can start, sending us stories, a little about
Right,
Bangalore.
right, right.
So I sent it, and of course, it got rejected. And at that time, I was very crestfallen. And now, on hindsight, I'm so glad that it didn't take off because, I would not have been able to discover myself. So what I did was, somebody told me that you can do blogs, and in the blogs, you can start writing about subjects that matter to you. And after so many years of an illness and being at home, I think what mattered to me was to see that my son grows up as a good child and a good human being. And apart from that, I had the history and the nostalgia of having grown up among middle class Bengalis who read on most weekends, and arts and crafts and culture was very much a part and parcel of my everyday growing up. So I began with writing little blogs and little Instagram stories, and then eventually, of course, gender is extremely close to my heart, and so I slowly started writing because I wanted to be a voice. Because we hear about women who've gone into very large universities, and during this interim when I was at home, my interaction used to be with a lot of girls who came in from Darjeeling or from the northeast of India, and they were working in larger cities, and just that entire shift that they had made, I know will never reach a newspaper. And I just felt that it was important for somebody to talk about these brave hearts, for them to cross over such a long distance and leave their little children behind to sometimes parents maybe who are not even willing to look after them, but just for the sake of money. And these brave hearts and their stories will never go out. And it also was somewhere a part and parcel of my growing up of watching my ma. My ma was a working woman all her life, and she had a government job, and now when I look back, the kind of bravery that she had when she went against the system to put me into a school that was way beyond her means. So that's how these stories began, with very short stories on Instagram, and from there, and of course, each of these stories are real people that I've met, and
Yeah.
and that's how the journey began. And I just thought that the data is very important for people to know that this is something that is there, and we need to be aware of so many suicides that happen, heartbreak. We tend to just take that so casually, but heartbreak can completely wreck a human being. And the story that Biswas will not speak about her is
Yeah,
another one.
yeah.
So yeah, I hope I've been able to answer you, Yash.
You have, you have. In fact, this actually brings me to a more serious part of the book, which I was hoping to come to a little later, but for the benefit of of our readers to be, who I hope will go and buy this in droves. What I wanted to ask you, Mahua, is, you know, these are not easy topics to write about, and oddly enough, in many ways, across economic strata, across the strata of, across socioeconomic strata of any kind, some of these stories seem to remain the same. One is of um, the woman who waits, who sort of knows that the person she's in love with has another um, family or wife or whatever, and sort of fruitlessly waits because she fools herself, and of course, sometimes with tragic consequences. The other is this whole story that you had, a very hard hitting, of the death of desire when you choose security in a marriage. I mean, these are not things people usually talk about. These are not topics that are usually written about, or if they're written about, they're not written about, in such a direct manner. There's usually more of a preamble and more of a reason given, things like that. But the fact that this is actually a statistic, that there are so many, in this case women, so many men too, I'm sure, who are essentially unfulfilled, and it's a data point, and nobody wants to talk about these things. I thought that was remarkable, and what I really must laud you on is that you managed to talk about each of these issues. Your stories aren't boring, they're crisp, they're short, but sometimes they're really hard hitting. I mean, I had to pause, I think, twice, and it's, I'm a really fast reader normally. I would just finish books like that, but I had to pause twice. I had to take a break and just introspect on some of the stuff I read, because who among us has not, faced at least some of these issues, the rejection, the price in your story, of course, the price of speaking up and rejecting somebody is very, very high. But in general, the price of sometimes rejecting people across the board in any walk of life, even in a job, can be, immense. And the fact that many of us, we don't speak up for fear of reprisal, we don't speak up, or if we speak up, uh, it's usually a miscalculation. These whole That whole conundrum, it was beautifully brought out, I thought. um, but that is another reason why I've also felt, I mean, how many of these stories, I don't want to be too nosy, but how many of these stories are personal, because they felt immensely personal when I read them. I mean, if they're probably personal to a lot of us, which is the hallmark of a good story, but how many of these are personal to you?
I think most of the stories are personal to me because I don't think I would be able to do justice if I could not feel and I've not gone through the entire process. And just to answer your question, a lot of people have asked me, that do you think it's really late that you've written a book, and you've published it? I don't think so, because if I had written this when I was 25 or I was 30, I would not have had the maturity to
Or the
understand
perspective?
the perspective. It would have probably
Absolutely.
you know and this is so much more universal. And honestly, actually, Yash, I live, I have this I'm like this horse with these blinkers on the side. I really don't know what's happening around me. And as much as it's hard for people to believe that about me, people who are close to me know that about me. I feel that if I've been given the second chance again, and there is some universal manifestation that has taken place for me to be able to come back into work, I cannot not do justice to my readers. I cannot be dishonest, and that is not me. And I will strive forever to write from my heart, and that's why this book is has been accepted by so many people who are way more accomplished than what I am. And I don't see any other way. So yes, that's the way it is. And yes, a lot of the stories that I've written have got a personal touch to it. Yes.
Yes, because I cannot imagine that a character like your Shundari Mashi, who's this lady in the immigrant colony in Delhi. I'm assuming here it's Chittaranjan Park, and who basically wears these kitten heels and a pinned up sari, and has so much face powder it looks like it's caked on like a geisha's makeup, as you describe it. And and the fact that there's a story, a very human story behind it. I mean, I just thought some of it, I mean, it's so real that I had to ask you. I mean, you must have met her in
Yes,
some way, shape, or form for her to
yes.
have leapt off the page like that.
Yes, I have. I have met a lot of women in Shillong. I've met a lot of women in Delhi. Shillong stories, I think, remain very highly etched in my head, and because, it was a little sleepy little hill station where the lights went off at, by about 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Most people went to bed, and it was also, I was raised when there was insurgency and they were killing every Bengali, and I have been very closely um, in very close quarters with people, women who had studied a lot, and they could never find a husband because they were too intelligent, and they were all my mother's age, and there were many who kind of took to spiritualism after a broken heart. And it was a very eclectic bunch of people that we met, but maybe emotionally, many of them were very bereft. And somewhere, I think also because my parents read and they discuss, and I think um, they stayed back in my heart, and I needed to talk about them. I still haven't
Yeah.
written all the stories, there's still more to go, and maybe the next book.
The other very fascinating thing, and I meant to ask you, was your personal history through this geography of displacement that you've taken all of us through in Nautanki Sala, which is essentially stories from Bangladesh, as in we're talking about the 71, that war and the displacement before that, right before, right after, around the time of the Mukti Juddha, actually. So that displacement from a Bengali Hindu perspective, which is not necessarily the same as the perspective of the freedom struggle, because there's a separate story of migration there entirely. And therefore, the offshoots of that not necessarily being in Kolkata, but in Northeast India, because there was a huge diaspora shift and an exodus there. And of course, subsequently, the insurgency and the exodus from there to Delhi, to other parts of India, also to Kolkata. And of course, you map the Delhi. In many ways, it's a tiny little microcosm of history of how Chittaranjan Park actually happened, especially in this the second influx of people. I was reading it and I was thinking this is as much a little. Sorry, I have a dog in my room. He's lovely, but he's being very naughty right now because he's attention seeking. So, Babu, jump, jump. So, so where was I? Yeah. So this whole thing, as I was reading your stories, I was thinking this is like a mini history of Chittaranjan Park in itself. And anybody who's known Delhi at all um, will recognize it in a heartbeat. So it's like Chittaranjan Park is a character in your book. Um, so tell me, I mean, how did this happen? This whole the geography you created in your collection of books. I mean, that's its own story. It's like a character.
Well, I mean, when you talk about the geography, because these are real stories, these are people I met, it obviously follows the entire journey of my own life of having, I was born in Delhi and then we moved to Shillong because my father's family was in Shillong, and then we fled Shillong, leaving our homes. And I don't think I kind of really understood when I was leaving Shillong what I was doing. I never got a chance to say goodbye to so many friends that we had made. And then, of course, Delhi. And then after Delhi, that I've been in Bangalore. I've still not kind of found a place that I don't know which place to call home any longer. And this sort of displacement of the heart is not something that any one of us really discuss. And there is a longing, I think, in each of my stories that I have, that runs through, I think. And that longing is a part and parcel of me and my family, of my father, my mother, and me. And the longing of a place that we really can't pinpoint and say which one it was, but there's a longing of all these three places. And they, of course, have to run through, and I, put my pen onto paper.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing, as I was looking at, I mean, there is really two kinds of Bengali diaspora. There is a kind that has a history of shifting over from Bangladesh, whether at the time of partition or whether it was later on in the early 70s, late 60s. But there's that one narrative which you've gone through, and then there's the other narrative which seems to have been my childhood, which is the exodus from Calcutta in the 80s, because industries dried up, which is of course a collection that I have yet to sort of find a very evocative collection of stories from. I mean, there are novels, but nothing quite like this. So I think perhaps that is a collection that's still waiting to be written of, or maybe I'm just not as well informed. But these are the two stories I always think of. I mean, your collection made me think of the these different exoduses that keep happening. And like you, of course, at one point in time I landed up in Bangalore, beginning of my career, IT industry and all that, after my MBA. Spent 5 very happy years there, and for a while I thought I'd settle there, except I just traveled some more and found myself back in Calcutta eventually. um, so coming back to Nautanki Sala, you know one of the things I find in your book is that there's a sense of poignancy in most of the stories. The only story, there are two stories that kind of stand apart in your collection. One is, of course, Tin Choto Chamuch, which is three small teaspoonfuls, which is a story that begins very in a very poignant manner, but ends surprisingly happily and quite beautifully. And the second one is the story about Rajjo, um, which is just eerie. And I have to admit, it is my favorite in your collection. And if I may request you to read a little bit from Rajjo for our audience.
I would love that. Thank you so much. Sure, I will do that. You. One second, I'll just pull that out. I'm so glad you liked that.
Yeah, I did. I just thought it was sent a little shiver down my spine. I was reading it, through shuttered windows, a darkened Sunday afternoon yesterday, and oddly enough, my street was absolutely quiet, and it was quite, a little chill down my spine. Um,
So,
so yeah,
which
I'd love to hear it from you.
um, let me just think. This okay. Will I read from in between?
As you wish, as you wish.
No, it depends on the kind of time that we have. I mean, I can.
We have 23 minutes down. We have time.
We have time. All right. This happens when you let go in front of a gypsy. Inexplicable things happen. Strangely, we think only to others. The Banjaras in Rajasthan are born into the cosmic cycle of nature. They find direction with the moon and the stars, showing them the way. On moonless nights, they sing into the dark, following its echo. Their songs are about death, birth, or love, never about possession. They're born free, they die free, in sync with the cycle of nature. The gorgeous Banjara women are sexually liberated, and it shows in their attitude to life. The nomadic tribe pitches a tent in different spots every other day, and through the torn tents, the Banjarans look into the moonlit sky to their cold rimmed eyes. Those beautiful eyes hold many stories. They love ornaments and tattoos. When one begins, the other ends, and their bangles often come up to their elbows, the remaining skin covered with tattoos. I met Rajjo. Rajjo Banjara on a street in Rajasthan. She was uninhibited, and a slim waist held up a ghagra teamed with a backless blouse that showed off her dark, smooth skin. Her hair looked like it hadn't been washed in a while, tied back in a braid with a mang tikka. Her eyes were filled with leftover coal. I smiled at her from the back seat of my car. She smiled back at me, eyeing all I had on me. I told her I loved her jewelry. She said she loved my watch. Her eyes shone as she looked me up and down. Raju squinted into the sunlight and offered me her earrings in exchange for my watch. Even before I could react, her hands were outstretched. She was a true negotiator, one who was unafraid to ask for something she desired. She epitomized someone who was used to getting what she wanted. Her appearance was that of a devil diva, yet she was pretty. She was difficult to trust, yet you couldn't help but give in to her charms. I took off my watch and she gave me her earrings. I shunned time and she embraced it. She continued to ask for more and more. We exchanged a few of our souls in this transaction. I took them off and put them in her hands, earrings for the watch, a chain for my chain. She put them all in a pouch without looking at me. I'd started enjoying this exchange between Raju and me. I saw a thrill in her eyes, something I'd lost somewhere during the course of my own life. She filled me, my soul. I was helpless in her guidance. She looked me straight into the eye and asked me to tell my driver to park the car on the side. I followed her like a little child, unable to maneuver the path back home. She was commanding in her tone. As my car slowly moved to the side, I watched her walk. It was the hour of dusk. Her dupatta billowed in the warm winter wind. I waited. She came close to the window and started to pull her hair ornaments from between her hair parting. It was a heavy piece of jewelry. She pulled it out, tearing a few strands of hair as she handed it to me. Then she made gestures for me to put it on my hair parting. As I raised my hands to put the heavy ornament, her eyes caught the light falling on my diamond ring. She put out her palm, asking me for a wedding ring. I was hesitant, but her eyes bore into my soul. Was I the one who had started this exchange? I could not care less, but who did? But it was starting to get out of hand now. I did not want to continue playing this game with the rules. I thought hard, but I couldn't hear myself. All I heard was a heavy breathing. I effortlessly pulled out the ring and gave it to her. She put the ring on her finger, looked at it, and then covered her breast with a dupatta. She began taking off her choli. It was heavy with mirrors and stitches, and she told me to give her my silk skirt. I took it off and she stared at my bra, touching the lace straps. It was like she had never seen lace before. She threw her choli on my face and I held the choli against my skin. It had the fragrance of the desert and the death of a spirit in it. It was still warm with her body heat. I smelled her clothes against my nostrils, letting the smell permeate into my being. I hurriedly wore the choli over my linen pants. She stood smiling as she wore my silk shirt over her black skirt. An uncomfortable pain rose in my head like a warning bell deep in my subconscious. I wanted this game to end. I raised my hand to wave her goodbye. She grabbed my arm and pulled me closer. I obeyed fully under her spell. I stood there watching her against the summer sky, her disheveled hair, my silk shirt on her body, hugging her contour. She looked ethereal. She came close and hugged me. I could smell the earth on her skin. As she moved away, she laughed and opened the string of her skirt. I watched it drop down. We stood opposite each other, her morality lying in a heap of fabric and my shock at the ease she had in her naked truth. I couldn't look at her. As I raised my eyes, she stood stoic like a nymph with her thin legs and her thick dark pubic hair. Disgust rose somewhere deep within me in a place I had no name for. The roads around us were empty at that moment. I felt I was in a surreal painting, looking in from without. The skirt lying lifeless and Rajjo in her unabashed nudity. She mumbled, saying she wanted my linen pants. Some part of me shook its head. She smiled again. My will crumpled. I was clueless about how my hand traveled towards the hook and I unzipped my pants. She watched me with a grin on her face. The pants slid down my legs. She helped me get out and wore them. I was suddenly aware of my bare legs. She handed me her skirt and I wore it, feeling its rough fabric. She held my hand and took my phone and gave me her begging bowl. I laughed at her. The begging bowl was chipped and had coins in it. She laughed alongside me, the phone now in her hands. The summer sky was dark and the wind was warm against my bare back. I stood on the street corner watching Rajjo's tattered garments and her begging bowl in my hand. She stood back and held her gaze towards me with admiration in her eyes. I felt shy in her presence, but a carnal part of me was pleased with my obedience which made Rajjo happy. Against the loud thumping of my heart, I noticed a man in the corner of the street wearing a white dhoti kurta, the Rajasthani leather mojeries made from camel leather that had walked many miles. He too had the same kohl or kajal in his eyes. He stood still watching us. How long had he been watching? Rajjo was oblivious to anyone around her. It was just the two of us in that moment. She muttered into the air. I could not hear much of what she said to me. She was Rajjo the nymph who belonged to the collective spirit of a bruised woman. She held my hand to show me the marks on her wrist. She had been tied up. As I gently touched her bloody bruises, they seemed to fade. I blinked. We were sitting in the back seat of my car. She told the driver to drive. She held my hand and gently put her head on my shoulders. I felt her broken spirit enter my heart. I wanted to cradle her in my arms, but I couldn't move. I'd never sat in a car before, or had I? The car passed camels in the desert skies. Finally, she asked the driver to stop the car at the gaze of a large house. I'd lost track of time and place. She whispered into my ears and said, "Let's have some fun. Just be me." I remember those words, "be me." I protested like a baby, and she held my fingers in a tight grip and told me, "A good customer is like a rain on a summer night." She knew him well. She told me with authority. Memories of foreigners, or goras, as she called them, flooded into me. No, remembered how they loved my knotted hair, my feet decorated with intricate anklets. Raja continued to whisper. I knew they were gullible and less demanding than others. I was confused, and yet her memories and words were like whiplashes in my soul. I asked her how long she had been living like this. She looked at me and laughed like a fox and said, since the time that she had become Rajjo. I couldn't comprehend what she meant. All I could smell was the wet earth with the aroma of the oil in her unkempt hair. She said she found it amusing that the Goras apologized for asking her to take a bath. They didn't know that she loved the scent of the fancy soap and the flowing water from the large shower faucet in their fancy hotels. It reminded her of Sawan in her village. I nodded, remembering. Raju told me that her regular patron took her under the shower and watched her take a bath in so much light that it blinded her. She found it humorous how he could just watch her bathe. He apparently loved to watch her wash as he sat in the bathroom with his drink. Raju confided that she knew he was fascinated by her dark complexion. He was also amused by her inability to understand his language, but Raju had long since deciphered the language of his desire. I listened to her and felt the wind slap against my skin like a lashing of swords. Her words were slithering in and out like a snake that hissed into my eardrums. I couldn't think anymore as the words fell like drops of rain on my body. And I realized I could not look beyond her sharp eyes. They were cold, calculating, cruel, but with the fragility found in a fox trapped in the forest. I found myself holding the heavy white metal earrings and realized I couldn't wear them because of their weight. And I had given her my something for them I couldn't recall. She continued to look unwaveringly at me, handbag, the last piece of me. Raju kept looking into my eyes with a searing gaze. I started apologizing to her for I don't know what, but she pressed her index fingers on my lips and almost gagged me with the weight of her finger. Her face was wet with unshed tears. She embraced me for the last time and she took the hand back from me, everything that I had. When I opened my eyes, I felt a gush of warm water in my body, trickling down into my navel and in the gap between my breasts. I was under the shower and warm lights. Behind me, I heard the large chunk of ice landing into a glass of whiskey. I was naked under the jets of water poured on my body and my legs from the large bathroom window. I saw Rajjo get into my car. Without another thought, I wrapped myself in the large white towel and ran outside to find Rajjo adjusting the car rearview mirror. Her lips were red, and I realized she was wearing my lipstick, my favorite red lipstick. She pushed her hair back, she rolled up the glass, and the car left the parking curb and towards the city. The driver stood by the side, mumbling about women and witches. Water dripped around my feet. I felt numb. The warm desert wind was blowing in my direction. Behind me, I could hear abuses. The Gora was yelling about paying a big sum to the pimp, and he wanted a special night. I walked back slowly inside, leaving a trail of the water on the sand. I took off the towel and stood under the warm water again. The Gora threw his whiskey on my wet body as I cringed. He laughed viciously and said I was warmer than the desert summer wind and vicious like the desert sandstorm that gets in his eyes. I smiled at him, remembering how Rajjo smiled. He helped me out of the shower, smelled my wet hair. As I walked towards the bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Rajjo stared back at me.
Bravo, bravo. Uh, I was just completely mesmerized, and I just love this story so much, Mahua. What I want to ask you now is a very brass tacks question. With 34 minutes down, you've got a little bit of time left. Where can people buy this book online and otherwise? Um, in Calcutta and other cities. I'm sure there are people watching from all over on your Facebook feed. So let's get down to brass tacks. People, if Sushruta will share the link in a minute, and most likely you should be able to click and buy it. But Mohua will take you through the different places where you can pick up Nautanki Sala, because honestly, this book is definitely worth a read. And I think you've just sampled some of her wear, uh, one of her wares. So, Mohua, over to you. Where can we buy this?
The book is available on Amazon, and now on the 17th for everybody from Kolkata. I mean, I'm on a panel there, so the books will be also be available in Oxford, and yeah, and on Amazon it's very easily available. So
And in Bangalore, your city?
yes, in Bangalore, in I think Blossoms, it's available there.
Right, right, right. Um, so after that, after that story, I'm so full of the story in my head. I'm going to actually digress a little bit. I'm going to talk about slightly different things, and I'm going to talk about your process of workshopping it, your process of finding a publisher, and just going to, take you back sort of to the earlier part of your journey um, when you were kind of creating the book sort of first in your imagination and then by bits and bobs and with all your collaborators, your encouragers whom you've acknowledged in the book. So take us through that a little bit. How did that
Uh,
work
the
out?
book Yeah, the book was written actually in the ICU corridors. My father and mother were taking turns, of being in and out of the ICU. They were very, very unwell. And why I went with a self publishing house was because I did not have enough time. My father was very unwell and I wanted him to see the book.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the day I did my Bangalore launch, it was on the 30th of June, and on the 1st of August, my father passed away. And so the entire journey about this whole book has been about so many stories that were in my heart, and there's still so much more, Yash, that I need to talk and I need to write about. And I think it's like a catharsis for me, and stories of people I've met, of heartbreak, of the things that women go through for look, for desire, for acceptance, in when you get married and you move into a different city, the displacement and the trauma that sometimes women go through. Children, sometimes when we become mothers and we put women on a pedestal, and it's another person that you're bringing on, and just the reality of I think, when I just began, I somebody had told me that you need to learn to bleed on paper. And like how I began with you, Yash, I've got these horse blinkers around me. I don't know what people are talking about me or how they're judging me. I write from my heart and I will continue to do so. I don't think I can be dishonest on paper, because this is such a prized gift that I've got after so many years of being bedridden, of knowing that I would probably never ever get back ever again. And just the love of my readers and people like you who even consider me worthy enough to be today on a conversation, I think I need to just give my best. And my best would
Yeah, but
be only.
this was actually at one level an extremely moving book because um, there was this wonderful story about a mother who's a professional, who's a government servant, who doesn't realize that she's coaching her daughter to settle for less when she says, you can do all this, but get yourself a rich husband, make sure you're pretty, make sure you're beautiful. And sure enough, this very gifted daughter is, she marries well, she marries into a rich family, but the only person who sort of told her to go for her own ambition was the stranger on a train, whom she thinks of very often because obviously those dreams have remained unrealized. It was just so poignant. It was so very poignant because, especially I think if you're sort of from the generation that we are from, because we must be very close in age. I was born in 72. I'm assuming you were born thereabouts.
Yes.
Um, it was quite the norm particularly for sorry. I do. I have a dog. I can't not have a dog. So this was a phenomenon that I work because I have to, but why do you have to work? You make sure you're a good girl and you're pretty and you have yourself a nice rich husband, and your education is really just a bit of a backup.
Yeah.
All this effort that we're expending. So the whole idea of kind of building that sense of worth professionally and otherwise later is a journey that has often come late to so many of us. And so thank you for putting it out on paper so succinctly. And I'm really, really looking forward to read, more of what you've written. I'm looking forward to now checking out your podcast. It's
Please
been
do.
immensely interesting. It's
The
been
podcast
immensely.
has a host of many people actually, and they've been it's we've just completed 100 episodes. And like I said, that I'm a believer and I continue to create content that I think. Then we have voices of children from Kamatipura, and these daughters have gone out and made a life for themselves. And I was stupid enough, initially to ask her that once you get this job, where will you, are you going to move into a new home? And she looked at me and she said, why? That's my home. I've been raised by 100 mothers. When my mother was doing work and I came back from school, I had another mother who was giving me my lunch. And I was
Yeah.
so, gobsmacked, because I think we only look at life from our own prism and we do not know what really happens outside. We've
Yeah.
had a rape, we've had
And of course, we cannot, often we fail to imagine that a woman who's a prostitute can also be maternal, can be a mom, can be extremely loving. It's just sort of that particular duality eludes many of us. Many of us were women. I mean, it's not just something. It's not just the male gaze, so to speak. It's just um, we are almost conditioned to think of people as labels, and of course, people are anything but labels. I mean,
So we've
so
had people, we've had single fathers. We've had Tushar Kapoor on the podcast who's spoken about his journey, about saying that he's not ready to get married, but he wanted to be a father. And we've had a lot of celebrities also who've come on the podcast. Nayanika Chatterjee, who's India's top model, and how she felt very sidelined for being dark, and while she grew up hearing this word. So the podcast is amazing. I mean, it really gives me my wings, because I have spoken to people outside India too. And we've had an author called Jashodhara, who's now, she helps women in the UK where if they want to seek divorce, because many of these girls are just married off and their families don't even turn back to look into the situations that they are left onto. And then after a point when they find their footing, they need to divorce and they need someone who's going to help them with less money. And she's an author. She's written a book about her own abuse as a Punjabi girl, that she was forced to get married. And so we've had some amazing people in the podcast, and I genuinely believe that journalism is so, I mean, everybody's got some side that they're taking, either it's left center or left, or it's center or it's right, and I think podcast allows me to bring the voices of people who may not get that space, in a newspaper.
yeah, yeah, yeah. As sometimes I feel that as we become, in some ways, journalism, we could say, has become controversial view, but over invested in politics. And as that happens, um, there are other avenues that open up for people who have interesting stories to tell, and people who have interesting platforms to share them on. And more strength and more power to you, Mohua, for
And
taking that whole mantle on. Now, I'm going to open this to questions. And what we would really, really like to do is have you ask questions to Mohua. Let me exit full screen so I can check out the chat.
you
Um,
have me, I can't read the questions.
so I will just put down this session is now open to audience questions, but you'll have to bear with me because I'm going to keep asking you questions until
Yes,
uh,
please.
someone pipes up. So coming back to Mohua Chinappa's first book, what next for you, Mohua?
Well, my next book, I've just begun. I finished writing a book of poems that I want to publish by the end of this year, I'm hoping. And also, my other book that I started are letters to my father. I've had a difficult relationship with him, and yet he's a remarkable man, and yet he's been very critical of me. And I want to write letters to him about the grief that I am seeing in the eyes of my mother, grief from the perspective of me as a daughter, grief on his side of times that I've seen what displacement actually does. I think that theme just continues for me. The trauma that our parents, for children who are born between the 70s and the 80s, many of the Bengali parents have all gone through this entire shift and what it did to them as people. And so I think there have been a lot of letters to my daughter. I don't think there have been letters to my father. So I want to write about how it's very, very imperative, for girls to have a very, very healthy relationship with their fathers, because that also becomes like that, point of your relationships with other men as you grow older.
Definitely. It's interesting that we have this parallel. I lost my father last year on the 21st of September. Um, and it's been just over a year, just like you. Um, and, there are certain parallels in the journey. My father initially was a little skeptical of my writing journey. Um, and, you had to kind of stick at it and argue your way through, and then eventually not even argue, just bulldoze your way through and do your own thing. But what sometimes happens as a result of that is that the voice, the slightly critical voice, kind of tends to remain in our heads, much as we
For
love our parents, and it can impact our creative output and how we write and what we write. But that too is your catharsis is to write another book. Mine was to get into certain other projects, all writing related. But yes, the cure to writing and any blocks in writing is just writing. Writing perhaps differently, but or different stuff. But the cure to writing is writing.
absolutely.
Looks like our audience is a bit, camera shy or chat shy, because I'm not seeing very many questions from
Oh,
them.
love
So I'm going
that I have.
to
There's been one.
I'm going to ask you
Oh dear.
definitely one more question before we kind of finish for the night, um, which is Mohua. Now that multi-platform in storytelling has become a very, very real thing, whether it's a podcast, whether it's something like this on video on live feed, whether it's a book, whether like me, I do a serialized thing on uh, a platform called Scroll Stack. Um, Now that this is an avenue that's open to so many of us, to explore our creativity in so many ways, as a storyteller and as a writer, how important are books to you as a format? Are they part of the pie? Are they a very principal chunk of the pie? I mean, how would you describe it?
Books to me are very, very integral, because I like the idea of traveling, through the words that I see on paper. And maybe I come from that whole generation. I do listen to a lot of podcasts too, because it's very easy while you're brushing your teeth and you're like probably doing your
True.
chores. You can listen to podcasts, and there's some very interesting podcasts. But I still like to read books, because I think. I like the smell of books. I like the feel of paper. I like to travel with my, with the author. And books still is nostalgia. House full of books. My father and mother, I think their greatest investment in life has been books. So I don't think books will ever be out of my entire life.
Interestingly, I mean, you find a book lined bookshelf, one of two in this room, right behind me. So I mean, I'm sort of really playing devil's advocate here, because I have also found that much as I love, audiobooks and the odd podcast or two, although most of the podcasts I listen to are music oriented, but audiobooks definitely are a huge favorite. If I have to immerse myself into a book, if I have to really retain it for long, and it's a first time read, I find I have paper, not even Kindle. My Kindle is not enough for me to retain information. It may be a generational thing. I don't think my nieces or the younger lot necessarily face this slight uh, you know uh,
Yes.
mental block. And I think people who are more used to the Kindle probably are more comfortable. But I still feel I need paper when I kind of have to really delve in. I still have to make notes. I mean, for instance, I'm afraid I've defaced your book horribly because I've done, yeah, really sorry to say this, but this is what I've done to your book.
I
But
also do.
without
I love.
that, without that, if I hadn't scribbled, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have, I have scribbled all over it, I'm afraid. But I mean, that's how, I kind of retain the information, especially if I want to really get into something in depth. But I wanted to have your take on it because at the end of the day, you are also, a very regular and a very popular podcaster. So it was a take I
Love
wanted to have.
books. I love doing my podcast too. I think it's a combination of both because in the podcast it's more about interviews and the content that's done. It's a conversation between two people, and it's phenomenal because they are short and they are within 30 to 45 minutes, and I can cover all
Tell us
subjects.
where to find it, which platforms, and the name. I mean, I know the name, but I'd much rather you talked
We,
about it.
we are on Spotify, on Apple, on Google. It's called The Mohua Show, MOHUA SHOW.
How lovely, Mohua Chinappa. This has been an absolute pleasure for me. Um, I cannot wait to sort of attend your launch. Hopefully, I'll be able to make it to Kolkata, make it to Oxford Bookstore on the day. I might be a little late because it begins at 6. I know, and I won't be able to reach before 6:30. But it's been an absolute joy. For those of you who tuned in, thank you so very much for coming on to the show. Thank you very much for being with us. And if you log in later and watch this, thank you very much. Make sure you're there on the 17th at Oxford Bookstore at 6 p.m. to meet the author and to buy her book. Thank you and good night.
Much thanks.
Thank you, Jashodhara and Mohua. It was a brilliant session, and the viewers they literally enjoyed. Though I was expecting a lot of questions to come here, but anyways, I think most of them are waiting. They're waiting to read the book, to buy a copy of your book, and I'm looking forward for the launch on 17th of October. I'm going to promote it on my page from my page as well. Expecting a lot of my friends to come down for the launch, and thank you once again for being a part of the Readers and Writers Club, both of you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was really a wonderful session.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sushruta. Thank
Sushroota. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Good
you. Bye.
night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thank
Good night.